at the start of this year, in February I think it was, I got hold of a bunch of hay and straw bales that had had water damage from the place that we source our hay and our straw for the chickens and guinea pigs. And I decided to try out a technique that I've seen touted a lot by permaculture enthusiasts, which is straw or hay bale gardening. And I'm never going to do it again in this garden, and here's why. So here is the area where I had my hay bales. As you can see, we still even have one that's pretty much intact, and this is one of the reasons. So the main reasons are pests, weeds, and general plant support is what I'll call it. So let's talk about pests. I have a huge problem with slugs in this garden. This isn't a secret, I've talked about it lots and lots and lots. And unfortunately, the hay and straw bales, the dampness that they held onto, made them the perfect habitat for those slugs and those snails. So everything that I was putting out here was getting slugged. Down here you can see a big courgette, which has done really well actually and survived. But on the end here, this little tag was to mark out spring onions that I had. They've been all slugged and ripped up. Over here I had cauliflowers. You can see the little patches of compost where they were planted. They all got slugged. I later sowed a whole bunch of other seeds on top. Swiss chard, carrots, everything really. All slugged, didn't come up. I had a cauliflower. I had a couple of cauliflowers actually in the stretch of hay bales here, and they got all slugged as well. Down here in the straw I had a courgette, that's been slugged. I've got one left over there that has survived. Just generally it's been slug city. It's been a nightmare. So if you have a garden with slugs, hay bales, straw bales, no go. Point number 2, weeds. Now I see people talk about hay bale gardening and they say, oh, it's fantastic, you put the hay down, you put the straw down, and those weeds can't come up. That isn't the case if you have certain perennial weeds. Things like, and the perennial weeds I'm talking about are the ones that we have in our garden. So brambles, bindweed, they are not deterred by the hay bales at all. Now I've tidied up recently, so there's not so much, but as you can see, there's bindweed growing through here. It's not put off these alpine strawberries at all either, they're all over. And just generally what was here before, over the winter, overwintering underneath with the roots, has still been able to come through. You can see bindweed there on the left again. So not only did the hay bales not suppress the weeds that were here already, they added weeds of their own, because if you think about it, what is hay, what is straw? Well, hay comes from the meadows where it's mown. There could be any kind of weeds in there, depending on how the farmer is growing and what herbicides they're using. That's another thing to check. You might be importing herbicides into your garden. And as for straw, straw is the stalk of grain, and that grain can still sometimes be present in the straw bale. So we look at this straw bale here on the end, and there's some really lush grass growing out of it. So this could be rye, oats or wheat. We feed it to the guinea pigs, so it's not too much of a problem. There's a seed head, so I think it might be wheat. But this is exactly what I mean. You're importing extra weeds. Not so good. Then finally, in terms of like actual soil quality and breaking down, I've had people say to me, oh, it's great, the hay breaks down really well, you end up with a really rich, loamy soil from it. Well, maybe part of the problem was that we had a very, very dry winter early on, so we weren't getting much rain actually in January and February. And so the bales didn't break down. I actually had to go in and break them down with a fork to get them to collapse and start to break down. The rotting that was inside was like an anaerobic rotting, so that it was very, very slimy inside, similar to how if you have a heap of grass clippings, they won't rot down properly, they'll just make this green slime. So you can see here, this is a bale that I haven't gone over with my fork. It's now it's now nearly the end of July, and that's still in hay bale shape, even though it hasn't got the baling twine on it. And if we open it up, you can see it's kind of like browning and it's kind of falling apart, but it's not really soil quality, so it makes me wonder whether it's actually going to feed the plants properly. This courgette here is obviously very happy. I do have another squash here on the right, and proponents of straw bale gardening do say that squash is a very good one to have in it, but I'm not convinced. So ultimately, I do not recommend hay bale gardening as a starter in your garden. I think maybe if you're starting out from like lawn, it could work. If you're starting out from very bare excavated earth, it could work. So like you see where people have had a house built and the surrounding land is almost like bare earth, then I think it could work, because it is putting a lot of biomass directly onto the soil to feed your plants eventually. But it just doesn't work in a garden like this. It's just resulted in a slug explosion, a grassy weed explosion, and hasn't helped my plants. So I'm not going to be doing it again in this garden. Oi! That's my one surviving sunflower. Get out of it.